window said that he should ask for more. Lloyd was kneeling. Xavier thought that he was acting strange again. A system window appeared that when he uses the collected CP points, he gains absolute powers against the laws of nature. The hero opened his eyes. After a while, Lloyd stretched. He looked at the guy and said that he was very tired. He couldn't even sleep because of these interrogations. He asked him if he found out who was in league with Kale. The hero looked down and said that no, they say they use confession spells on everyone who uttered the secret phrase. Why is it taking so long? Most likely everything is not going so smoothly. Because of all this, leaving the capital is not possible. He is stuck here for a long time. Lloyd looked away and thought that he wants to quickly resolve this issue and go home. But this attempted murder in the novel was not described in such detail. Perhaps it should have been in the second season. He thought that the event itself happened 3 years earlier than in the novel. Given this, the future may change even more. The guy pursed his lips and thought that if this continues, they will have problems. His trump of knowledge of the future will be useless. He thought that he had just received the necessary skills. A system window appeared that when he uses the collected CP points, he will gain absolute power against the laws of nature. The skill ending spoiler is available. The hero thought that he can really use this skill. The guy looked at Lloyd and asked what about Xavier, is he still under investigation? That Her Majesty called him for an audience because he became a sword master. The red-haired man looked at the hero. He was silent for a while. Then he exploded and asked again. Lloyd asked what is surprising here. He said that Xavier defeated Kale. Obviously, it was possible because he became a sword master. The brunette raised his eyebrows when the guy said that he thought he did it thanks to the help of the soldiers. He asked if there was any sense in his words. Even 100 soldiers would not be enough to defeat the sword master. The red-haired man smiled and told him to wait. Lloyd looked at him carefully. Alicia sat on the throne and said that thanks to this story, Xavier proved his amazing sword skills and also demonstrated a change in the shape of the aura ball, which he had never seen before. The queen looked at him and said that as far as he knew, instead of the commander of the guards, she was currently free, so she ordered him to stay by her side as the commander of the guards from now on. The guy looked down. The red-haired man looked at the hero and asked, is the knight leaving them? The blue-haired man remained silent. The queen looked at him when he apologized for his rudeness. Lloyd looked away. He grimaced and asked, does he really know Xavier that little? The boy bowed and said that this unworthy one is only a knight of Baron Arcus Frontera. He asks to understand that he cannot leave him. The queen looked at him carefully. She sat on the throne and asked if he understood what she was asking him for. The woman raised her eyebrows and said that disobeying the royal order was akin to treason. Xavier was kneeling when she asked if he knew how this could end for him. He looked down and said that his fate was in her hands. He only asked to allow him to write one farewell letter to the Baron. Alicia leaned on her hand and said that this was his way of telling her that he would rather die. How noble. The blue-haired one asked for forgiveness for the insult he had caused. The queen frowned. The knight looked down. Alicia told him to go. She respected his will. The boy bowed and thanked her. He stood up from his knees. The knight walked down the corridor. He looked forward when he was called. The boy was looking at him. He stood in front of Xavier and asked what the queen said. Xavier smiled. He looked at the redhead and said that he was forever a knight of the Frontera house. The boy smiled. Alicia sat on the throne and thought about the Frontera estate. She smiled and thought that she was not very popular with the local lord. After a while, Lloyd looked at the system window. He raised his finger and thought it was time to look at the skills he received for other achievements. The guy scrolled through the list and said that the title My Whole Body Aches he received after a skirmish with Newman. He also received the title Residents of Frontera Are Blessed, and the title I Will Stretch Your Mug on an Orc allows you to use What Is This? The hero smiled and said that he also received the titles Magentano Fisherwoman, Absolute Trust in the King Alicia, and Not a Single Suspicion of Treason in Case of a Conspiracy. Lloyd smiled and thought that he would be safe no matter how those old men tried to frame him. Many aristocrats were punished because of him. Suddenly his face changed. He thought that the full moon was shining brightly. Now he would always receive bonuses when the moon was full. A system window appeared that the full moon was lighting up the night sky. Bonus CP points from the titles he received were awarded. Lloyd stood up and thought that the points had appeared. A system window appeared that using the points he could see fragments of the future that would unfold at the end of the chapter of this story. The required CP points were 20. The hero smiled and thought that no matter how much he thought about it, in the current situation he could only see a lousy future. Wouldn't it be sad if he gained weight by overeating candy? He pressed the yes button to use this skill. Suddenly, darkness formed around him. The guy smiled nervously and asked what it was. He was kind of scared. He started calling Mr. Message. Suddenly a wall of fire appeared nearby. Lloyd turned around and wondered where he was. There was a city around him. He thought he knew this city. The hero turned around and thought it was the Frontera estate. He thought why the houses and trees looked so strange. The guy frowned. He looked at the body. The brunette turned around and thought what it was. There were many bodies around him. He thought, what kind of ending was this? Lloyd frowned and shouted if there was anyone here. He asked to answer him. The guy ran forward and turned to the message. He asked, is this all real? Is this all really happening? The hero looked forward in shock. Xavier was standing in front of him. The brunette opened his eyes in shock. He saw his parents. The man stood in front of him. He said that if only he had passed earlier. His future self was crying. He said that he was so sorry. He apologized for not being able to protect them. The hero gritted his teeth. He raised his head and screamed, why did it have to end like this? The boy turned around. A black flock was flying towards the city. They were flying insects. The locusts were approaching. Lloyd frowned. The boy took a step forward. Xavier walked past the hero. He pulled out his sword from its sheath. The blue-haired man swung his sword. His mana cut through the cloud of insects. The boy ran forward. He struck again. The knight screamed. He struck a third time. The locusts scattered. Lloyd looked ahead and thought, did they really succeed? The locusts were approaching them. The swarm was flying towards the knight. He was surrounded. The hero woke up in reality. He was sitting on his knees in shock. His face dripping with sweat, he turned to the system and asked if this would really happen. A system window appeared, saying, even after seeing all this, he still doesn't believe it. Lloyd stood up from his knees. He ran forward. The guy ran down the hallway and thought that he clearly said that this would happen in the future. He remembered how his future self said if only he had come a little earlier. The hero ran forward and thought that he didn't know how, but they had to deal with this. The incident with the locust invasion was familiar to him. Alicia raised her head and asked, would the entire Cremona region really suffer? Lloyd knelt before her and said that it was true. They needed to mobilize the army to be ready for any situation. The queen replied that it was unexpected and he should tell her more about this disaster. The guy frowned and said that this was the work of the enemy Asfahan. Their main goal was to weaken the power of the Magenta Kingdom by creating the so-called domino monsters. He knelt before the queen and said that by subjugating the monsters of the eastern wasteland, they were depriving them of their natural habitat. Another group of monsters would be pushed westward, and with the other monsters that came, the creatures would push each other like dominoes, causing irreparable damage to the western territories. The hero frowned and thought that in the novel, this would happen in 3.5 years, and not even on their lands. It should happen further north. He does not know why the time and details have changed so much, but now is not the time to think about it. Alicia looked away and thought that Asfahan must have really made some encroachments in the western wastelands. It is definitely possible, however. The woman looked at Lloyd and turned to him. She raised her chin and said that this news about Asfahan raises doubts. How does he know this? The guy tensed up and thought that he urgently needed to come up with an answer. The queen said that if you think about it, he was hiding a lot from her. She frowned and said that even Asfahan's actions were less suspicious than his behavior. Lloyd licked his lips. He bowed and said that thanks to small connections, kinship with the tribe of steel sand orcs from the wasteland, they told him what was happening throughout the west. He knelt and said that before anyone else, he learned about Kale's attempt to kill her. He and the chief chamberlain exchanged strange phrases and kept a close eye on each other. At first he thought they were dating and purely for fun followed them and caught them red-handed. The guy closed his eyes and said that what allowed him to absorb mana and make the surrounding environment viscous. She also knows about his Knight Protector, a genius the world has never seen. Alicia looked at him suspiciously when he said that he had been with him since he was a baby and trying to protect himself learned various techniques from him. He was also a genius of sorts, that's why he succeeded in this so much. She thought that almost all of this made sense. The queen frowned and thought that she thought that he was making this story up as he went along. The guy thought that she seemed to sense some improvisation. The woman was silent. The guy waited tensely for her answer. A system window appeared that the reward effect was activated. The queen's absolute trust. Not a single suspicion of treason in the event of a conspiracy. Lloyd opened his eyes in shock. Alicia closed her eyes and agreed. She said to immediately allocate fighters, 500 white spearmen, and she gives him 50 magicians for support, transfers command into his hands, since he knows the enemy's movements. Lloyd smiled predatorily and thought that she was too generous. He thanked her for the favor. The queen leaned back in her chair and said, he knows better than anyone that this is no favor. Does he really think that she will ask for nothing for believing in unfounded conjectures? He replied that he knows that nothing is done so easily in this world. He smiled and said that if this helps to stop the attack of the monsters, then she should know that all the predictions of the solution are in the power of Her Majesty, and he will do everything possible to restore the authority of the royal family by solving this problem. Alicia smiled and said that he was driving suspiciously, but she liked the way he spoke. Lloyd and Xavier saddled their horses. They rode forward. The hero's face fluttered in the wind. His knight said that there must be an explanation for why he was doing this, but could he go slower? The guy galloped forward. He said something unintelligible. Xavier said that he understood everything and he could share it with him. The horses galloped at the speed of sound. Lloyd said something unintelligible, and Xavier translated it as that first they needed to get to the estate in 5 days. The brunette flew forward and thought that now his knight could defeat the entire army of the small country. See how a dozen people are cut down with one sword. The moral qualities of their enemy will be broken. This time their enemy is not even a person, so there will be nothing to break, they only know how to run towards the prey. The hero remembered the locusts and thought that they are not familiar with the fear of death, so one Xavier will not be enough. He thought that besides, when fire attacks are coming at you from all sides, 1 or 2 people of the power of fire cannot stop this. Lloyd looked at Peapodong. He should split up here. He asked him to show up on time. The beast jumped aside. The guy smiled and said they had a plan, so his money vein, the Frontera estate, should hold out. They jumped off the cliff. After a while, the guys galloped forward. The hero stopped his horse. He looked ahead tensely. A cloud of locusts was gathering over the mountains. Lloyd frowned and thought that there was only a little time left. The people looked up in surprise. A swarm of locusts was approaching them. The guy looked up and asked what was that. Lloyd galloped up and screamed, "Have they gone crazy? They need to get out of here right now." He held out his hand and said to give him the biggest pot. The locusts flew forward. They were approaching the building. The window exploded next to the woman. The monster appeared in front of her. She looked at it in shock and screamed, "What was it?" Emily closed her eyes and screamed. The woman picked up a chair and swatted a beetle with it. More locusts burst into the building. Marbella took the girl by the hand and shouted for her to run after her. She looked out the window. A large cloud of locusts was approaching the estate. The woman darkened and thought about what was going on. Arcus ran into the room and shouted to his wife if she was okay. He frowned and told her to wait. They opened the doors to the street. There, the locusts surrounded the house. They looked at the people. Dayan ran forward. He ran and shouted for the soldiers to gather at the Baron's house immediately. The man frowned. He heard someone scream. The guy was being attacked by monsters. Baron looked at him and thought that the villagers were in danger, but they needed to protect the Baron. He remembered the Baron saying he hoped that this fate would pass them by. But if trouble came to their lands, first of all, he must take care of the inhabitants. He believed that the lords and his knights exist for the sake of the common people. The man gritted his teeth. He cut off the head of the locust. The knight killed another monster. He covered the boy and told him to hold on to him. There were many insects around them. The orc cut down several monsters with one blow. Herach, the renowned warrior, shouted to the orcs that even if today was their last day, they must keep their promises to their brother and family. The orcs protected the hero's parents. Bayern and Mihail destroyed the monsters. The orcs tore them apart with their bare hands. The knight covered the child with his body. The woman sat on the floor. The other citizens were also attacked by locusts. Herach was bitten by the monster. Another orc protected the woman. The people and orcs fought back as best they could. The monsters kept coming. The woman was holding a baby in her arms. She looked to the side. The locusts were biting the baby's hair. Suddenly the monster let go. All the insects were looking in one direction. A light appeared inside the swarm. All the monsters flew at him. The hero screamed that they were damn insects that eat grass. Xavier was slashing with his sword. Lloyd was holding a shield. He looked to the side and screamed if they heard that. They were probably already salivating over that delicious sound. The knight gritted his teeth. He hit the shield again. All the monsters were flying at them. The locust's eyes were glowing. They formed a single line. The insects were flying at the hero. Arcus and Marbella were watching this. The Baron looked ahead and said that he knew that voice. His wife confirmed that it was definitely their son's voice. Xavier and Lloyd were jumping forward. The brunette said that they were approaching in a very frightening way. The knight looked back and said that they were following them. Everything was as they planned. Lloyd frowned and said that was great. They should gather a little more and then lure them to the outskirts. The guys galloped forward. Xavier swung. His friend said to be stronger now. He was distorted by the force of the blow. The hero looked at him and shouted that this was too much. Why was he smiling like that? He replied that he needed to hit again. Lloyd thought that everything was happening as it was said in the novel. Insects react to such loud sounds. He closed his eyes and thought that this really works. The hero looked ahead and said that now they should gallop to the Rakan estate. Xavier frowned and thought, is he really going to help them even in such a critical situation? A system window appeared that Xavier's sympathy for him increased by 3 points. He was awarded 54 PR. Lloyd frowned and thought that he would not be satisfied with the only bill for water. Rakan estate. The Viscount ran away and shouted, what was that? He looked away. Lloyd and Xavier ran into his estate. The old man looked at the rescuers and recognized Lloyd. He looked at him darkly and told him not to even think that he would give him a deferment on payment. The Viscount was terribly scared. The hero took out a shield and shouted forward. The Viscount watched them go. The locusts left the Rakan estate. Xavier looked at the guy and said that it was such a tactic to herd them together, passing through the building. The hero laughed like a madman and said that it was not a tactic. He would still take it out on them. He would blow their minds. The blue-haired man looked at him in shock and thought he was crazy. Lloyd was leading a swarm and shouting how could they do that, would they be able to keep up with him? He frowned and said that now they would meet another Lloyd. Xavier looked at him and asked him to save his strength. There would be no point in shouting. He asked if he really didn't understand anything at all. The hero turned out to be a crazy demon again and said that in order to save them, they needed to shout in order to blow their minds in the future. The blue-haired man looked at him in shock and thought he was crazy. The guys ran from the monsters. The brunette said that this was enough and now they should gallop to their Merez swamps. Lloyd looked ahead in shock. There was a cloud of monsters in front of them. He said that there were even more of them. The knight ran forward and told him to cover himself with his load and follow him. He took out his sword, and he cut the locusts one by one. Lloyd took cover from the corpses. Xavier cut a path for them. The locusts flew into the sky. The boys galloped forward. Lloyd said that they were all together now. They ran across the field. The hero said that there was very little left. The horse was running with its last strength. Lloyd looked at it and wondered if it was already dying. The brunette frowned and told the knight to prepare his back. The hero jumped on his horse and hugged his comrade. The boy frowned and said that now he was a horse and must run. Xavier jumped off his horse. He landed on the ground. Lloyd looked ahead and spurred him. The blue-haired man galloped forward. He ran even faster than the horse, but the locusts were catching up with them. Xavier gritted his teeth. Lloyd called Belle and Hippo. The animals appeared from the river. The boys disappeared into the stream. Belle swung her tail. She turned to the swarm, and she spewed fire at them. The locusts burned. The entire swarm burned instantly. The people watched this fight. Lloyd frowned and said that it was time for the second wave. Hippo ejected water from himself. The monsters were washed away. The beast destroyed half of the swarm. The monsters fell to the ground. The hero frowned and said that it was time for the third wave. Xavier rushed forward. The boys combined their forces. They destroyed the rest of the monsters. They all fell to the ground. Lloyd crouched on the ground and breathed heavily. He fell back on the ground and said that he was going to die now. Xavier said that he was sure that they dealt with most of them. He continued that there were still a lot of them, more than several thousand. The hero smiled and said that it was okay. The hamster ran to them. He plopped down next to them. Lloyd said that their time had come. Padong brought 300 elite warriors of the Steel Sand tribe. The horses stopped. 500 white warriors and 50 mages arrived. The brunette closed his eyes and said that they should let them handle this. They had other things to worry about. The knight asked what they were. He looked at the hero when he said that they had to deal with the domino of monsters. Lloyd frowned and said that it wouldn't end in one wave. The knight raised his horse and addressed the warrior.